Normally when someone introduces a guest speaker, it's a situation where that person who's doing the introduction has just met the guest speaker about 5 minutes before, and they hurry up and grab some background information, and they stand up and talk about what a great speaker that person is. I'm lucky and honored to have met Pete Conroy just about a little after this time last year. I was down in Anniston, Alabama, with work that I'm doing as a consultant, and had the opportunity to call Pete, find out his name, and find out the background. Because if you ever have an opportunity to meet or have a chance to travel to Anniston, Alabama, what we have here is nothing compared to what's there already. And by doing some more research is how I found Pete, and he said, I'd like you to come. I'm going to be presenting at the Rotary Club in Anniston, and I'd like you to be my guest at that club meeting, which is where the first time I met him as a guest speaker and heard his presentation. It's amazing. It makes the hair on the back of my neck just stand up every time I hear it, and even when I see it. So Pete Conroy is with Jacksonville State University. He's the Director of Strategic Partnerships. And he served under and with 6 Alabama governors and 4 White House president administrations. He's with Jacksonville State University, but he's been really instrumental in getting the Freedom Riders Park in Anniston, Alabama. And as I said, it's just an amazing place if you have the opportunity to get down there. He is here today. He has not charged us to be a speaker. Most of the posters over there were sent by Pete's organization for us to have on display. We're going to have this exhibit and some more. The Greyhound Museum, John, is going to provide us some additional pieces that we'll have on display through February. We're going to let schools and churches know that it's an exhibit. But because of Pete, we have the display that we have that you see right here. So thank you very much for doing that. So I'd like, with further ado, bring up Pete Conroy, our speaker today. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me okay? Yes. Probably too well, sorry. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been great to get to know Mark, and we'll spend like 30 minutes right now, and we're going to try to just kind of tell you the story of the establishment of the United States of America's the newest national park, and it's Freedom Riders. And the whole story was, evolved from a bus just like that. And one of my favorite views right now is to see the profile of Paul sitting in that seat right over there. Right, it's great. And it's been nice to get to know some of you, and it's nice to get out of the South. I've been down there for a long time, and I'm from here. I'm from Scranton, born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and grew up in Clark Summit. And never in a million years did I think I'd end up doing civil rights stuff down in Alabama. I never thought Alabama even existed. It could have been Siberia from my world in Pennsylvania. And so I got some pictures, and I don't know how to do this, Mark. It's just click the button.
Yep. No.
Oh, am I doing it right here on the screen?
Right.
Got it. Okay, good.
Yeah, that would.
Bam. All right, let's do this way.
Or that way.
All right, great. So literally, I'm starting with a picture of me being born in Pennsylvania. And my mom passed away about a year ago and was going through old stuff. And I was reminded that I had this charmed life. Born in Scranton, great mom. My dad, an amazing guy, World War II hero, and everyone here is a history buff, so I'm going to tell you the fast version about my dad. He was in his late 80s when my wife, a psychologist, finally got him to tell the story. And my mom was talking to me, and she sounded like Charlie Brown. Like I just couldn't even hear what she was saying, because what my dad had said was, yeah, I was flying over Iwo Jima at the very moment the flag went up. Catches your attention, right? And indeed, he broke radio silence and said, hot damn, the flag is going up on Suribachi. I'm like, this is my dad? Like, here I am. He's like, I never knew this, and Joe Rosenthal, that was the story, that Joe Rosenthal, the Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer, heard my dad's voice and ran over to the mountain where the guys had just done the flag, and he said, hey, you guys do that again, it'll make a nice picture. And sure enough, at that very moment, the photograph was taken by Joe Rosenthal, defining arguably the most memorable moment of World War II history. And as I stand here surrounded by these buses and antique cars upstairs and your stories, and I'm reminded that it just, you can blink and miss amazing chapters in history. Amazing chapters in history. Yeah, hey, batteries. We all know about. I can yell.
No, he's coming.
Okay. Well, I'll keep talking. So anyway, that story about my dad that evolved into the national park that's there in Washington. It's the largest bronze, probably in the United States. And just before my dad passed away, I was able to get him up there to Washington. And he didn't know it, but it was an ambush. I had him fly in to Washington. We went over to the statue. There was 7,000 people there for that sunset ceremony. And 7,000 people. There we go. And so anyway, before he passed away, it was great to have the opportunity to have him recognized. Just more pictures that are somewhat ridiculous. This is me as a little guy in Pennsylvania in Clark Summit. And I think it's ironic that I was wearing a rebel Halloween costume. And who would have thought I'd end up in Confederate country doing the kind of things I've been working on. And I'm not going to show this picture to anyone back home. I got a couple of kids. I got a great daughter and a great son. My son is 8, and my wife from Cuba, the Dominican next door neighbors. But this is the story about Freedom Riders, and I really have just been so lucky. I had the chance to do. I've done 4 projects. Like my first national park was Little River Canyon, and that's a very deep canyon, kind of near Chattanooga, Atlanta, Birmingham, if that can put your brain to what I'm talking about. And I started working with Congress, and one of the things my dad always showed me, and it's evidenced by you all being here now, he said, son, the world is run by people who show up for meetings. And I've always thought that was pretty much true. So I was the guy that would show up for meetings. And we worked with Richard Shelby, who at the time was a Democrat. We worked with Tom Bevel, who at the time was the chairman of all the appropriations committees in the United States of America, back when there was money for that kind of stuff. And we created Little River Canyon, and it now has 500,000 visitors a year with a $16 million annual economic impact. I worked with Clinton on a wilderness project, and worked with Bush #2 on a national wildlife refuge, an old military base that had been bombed over the years. It had unexploded ordnance coming out of the ears. And what we did is we got, this is crazy, a little Alabama town, we got $200 million out of the Department of Defense to clean up the unexploded ordnance and make it walkable and passable for visitors, and now it's one of your national wildlife refuges. But he never thought that I would end up leading the efforts to establish this Freedom Riders National Monument, which was done by Obama just as he was walking out the door. And I'll tell you the story just a little bit. I had no idea that, I enjoy history, but one day a friend of mine, a state senator, said, hey, Pete, guess what? I got great news. The Department of Transportation is rerouting a road, and we're going to be able to tear down that damn place where that old bus burned years ago. And the academic scholar that I am, I said, what bus? I didn't even know what he was talking about. And sure enough, that was the moment when I realized that it was the Greyhound that had come into our little town. The Trailways was just an hour behind the Greyhound. But when the Greyhound got to the bus station, that's when things happened. And in fact, here's the backstory. There was a leader for these Freedom Riders. Remember, they're about half white, half black. And the leader was in Atlanta. And he had this inspirational moment with Martin Luther King Jr. King told the leader of the group, don't go to Alabama tomorrow. We've learned FBI connections. No battery. But that's okay. I'll keep FBI connections. And so in any case, they said, don't go to Alabama, they're going to kill you. And the guy said, oh, well, that would be horrible, so we won't, and we'll reroute, and we'll spend a day in Atlanta and figure out what the next step is going to be, right? And then he went, oh, we're not feeling too good. He had the flu. Woke up, slept in. Hank Thomas was like, we're going to Alabama, even though they didn't get that part of the message, right? And so sure enough, they came to Alabama, and 50 guys met them at the bus station, and that's where things swirling. Let's see, I have some pictures to go along with this. So as simple as that little map is, that does give you the idea of where my little town exists. It's right in between the two major cities. And but when they got to Anniston, sure enough, you've read the story and you've seen the pictures. They started slashing the tires. And this is where I'm thinking about some of y'all, and that is, see, that was the Southern coming out in me. I've been around long enough. It's an easy word. Try it, y'all. It feels good. But yeah, so Hank Thomas there, he was able to. They were on the bus, and the tires got slashed. This is where I was thinking about you all, because the bus driver was not a civil rights leader. He was not involved with the Freedom Ride. He was a bus driver. And all of a sudden, the history of the United States of America was basically on his bus at that moment. And they were, like I say, they slashed the tires, and he's thinking, like probably anyone, I just don't get paid enough for this, right? And so the bus driver finally was able to pull out with one tire badly damaged, and they made it about 4 miles. They kept going in the direction of Birmingham, but they went from Anniston 4 or 5 miles away, and that's where the mob caught up with them, and that's where the Molotov cocktail went into the side window, and I was just showing where the gas tank is, and that's about where the Molotov cocktail had got in, and I guess it was hot enough with enough flame, it made its way to the gas tank as the KKK folks, local law enforcement, were all holding the door shut, screaming, let them burn alive, using all sorts of expletives. And I don't know whether or not this is a thankfully or not, but the Molotov cocktail got close to the gas, bam, it blew up, the doors go flying open, and out come these, smoke inhalation and these terrified freedom riders, and they're all sitting around on the grass. And next thing they know, my friend Hank Thomas, African American guy at the time, he was 19, big, tall, skinny kid back then. He's like, water, please, water. And he got a 2x4 up the side of the head, and then even local law enforcement was beating on him. And then this little girl, little white girl, whose dad was involved in the violence, Janie Forsyth McKinney. It was Mother's Day, 1961, and I've got some pictures to go with this. So this is this kind of a claustrophobic place where the bus was first attacked. And this is an actual image of the Greyhound bus station is on the left, and a store is on the right. And then they made it this far out. And this is Hank. And of course, he ended up getting arrested. But Hank was, asking for the water. He got clobbered. And this little girl, Janie Forsyth McKinney, she just couldn't take it any longer. It was, like I say, Mother's Day, Sunday, church clothing, everybody's dressed up. And she decided she just couldn't take it any longer. No Dasani bottles or Aquafina or any of that kind of stuff back in 1961. She gets a bucket, a tin bucket, galvanized bucket, and a bunch of glasses. And she goes straight out to the Freedom Riders. And one of the first people she gives the water to is Hank. And that was one of these little moments that we all recognized as a moment of hope. And so you'll see a little bit later how we're going to kind of capitalize on that. This is Hank now, and I got something special for you. I am working Hank, and by the way, Hank ends up, remember the name Andrew Young, Ambassador Young, Mayor of Atlanta? Well, Hank and Andrew Young, as kids, didn't have any money, but they thought they would try to get the very first Tasty Freeze franchise in Atlanta. And so they put their dollars together and they opened up a Tasty Freeze. Well, by this stage, he had gone through lots of Tasty Freezes, Marriotts, and you name it. this guy has more money than God about this stage, and he owns most of the big Marriotts, or 2 or 3 of the big Marriotts in Atlanta. And he's doing very well now, but I think part of his success has come from his coming back from this day of crisis. But so Hank and Janie became quite a thing. When Oprah had her very last TV show, she invited all the Freedom Riders to Chicago. Did you see that episode by any chance? And only Hank was invited on the Oprah couch. That means you are anointed, right? And so they sat there together and were able to talk about Freedom Riders. And so next is this thing I have. I was going to mention a couple nights ago. I wanted to introduce him to someone. Hank, and I said, Hank, I'm going to be in Hershey, Pennsylvania. This guy named Mark has invited me, and I said, any chance you could call in? And he looked at his calendar and he said, no. He said, but let me record something, all right? And so I really hope the microphone will last a few more minutes. That was it. Okay, here it goes.
I will never, ever forget the feeling that we had on that bus that I had when we pulled into Anniston. The streets were deserted, like a movie at high noon. Everybody was off the street. You get that eerie feeling. Everyone on that bus was very quiet. I think we were all thinking the same thing. What are we in for? And when the bus turned down that street, Kearney Street, and then into the area where the Greyhound bus station was, and we saw that crowd, we knew then we were going to be in for a rough time. I had no idea how rough it was going to be, but as the bus pulled into its loading and unloading area, and that crowd of men started yelling and screaming, the bus driver himself was very afraid. When he got off the bus, he did us a favor. He locked the door so no one from the outside can get on. And I remember hearing him say, look, boys, the only thing I did was just drive the bus here. I think he said that because he feared they may also attack him. So he went inside the bus terminal. And since they could not get onto the bus to get us, they started breaking out the windows. And thank goodness the glass on the bus windows was the type that did not shatter. Otherwise, we would all have been covered with glass shards, and the windows just cracked. Then they started to rock the bus. Now, a large Greyhound bus was being rocked by being outside. I remember sitting with Ed Blankenheim, the late Ed Blankenheim, and Ed said to me, hey, we need to get up and go and see if the bus station is segregated. And I looked at him in amazement. I said, Ed, we don't need to do that. And there was no way I was going to get off of that bus. And after a while, though it seemed like hours, after calls to Robert Kennedy and the president's office, Greyhound got a driver who would agree to drive the bus on to Birmingham. We did not know at the time that the bus tires had been cut. So the driver got on and tried to drive away. There were people sitting down in front of the bus on the outside and cars. The bus could not travel any faster than maybe 15 miles per hour. There were 3 or 4 cars in front of the bus, a couple of pickups, and a line of cars behind the bus. I don't know why they were doing that, but I soon found out because they knew that the tires had been cut, and it was just going to be a matter of time before the bus would have to come to a stop. And it did. A few miles down Route 202 in front of a little country store, where by coincidence, and I guess it was a coincidence, a crowd of people had gathered. They'd come from church. They had their children with them. And they were there to see that the Freedom Riders get in mind comparing that to a story I had read about Jews in a little village in Poland in 1943. Where the Germans came in, rounded up all of the Jews in that town, took them to this synagogue, which was made of wood, put them all there, nailed the doors shut, and poured gasoline all over the building. Set it afire, and a little boy coming along saw it, and he ran to the local chapel, the pastor saying mass, and he yelled, "They're burning the Jews, they're burning the Jews." The priest dismissed service so that the parishioners can go and watch the Jews being killed. That's what I thought of some 20 years later when I read the story entitled Troubled Memory. Those people had come to see the Freedom Riders get killed. And when we finally got off of that burning bus and all of us was in need of water, a little girl, 12 years old, little Jane, was running in and out of her father's store bringing us water. And those adults looked at her with scorn. And I'm told later on that little Janie had trouble staying in that town. But that's the way it was in 1961 when some people wanted to kill 7 of us because we dared to sit in the front of the bus or sit as an integrated group. I will never forget those moments.
Wow. Well, you're the first to ever hear that. And it's pretty powerful. I feel like after listening to Hank, I can just go home now. You got the sense of what happened. But Hank is a delightful guy, and he's thrilled. We're working on this in Anniston, Alabama. You know, when he first came to Anniston, it was not the reception anyone deserves. And he's come back now so many times. We're going to give him the key to the city, and we really have a fantastic relationship. He was not the only Freedom Rider. There are 2 other Freedom Riders that I'd really like to point out in this kind of bad picture. The guy on this the guy sitting in the chair is Charles Person. He was on the Trailways bus, and he was the youngest of the Freedom Riders. He was only 18 years old at the time, and we just rang him up a few minutes ago, and Mark spoke with Charles, and he says hello to everyone and wishes he could be here as well. And the guy closest to me is Bill Harper, and he's my co-chair. He was on another one of the Freedom Rider buses, and when we had the idea to create this new national park, we created this committee called the Freedom Riders Park Committee, and a local legislator, an African-American lady, said, "Well, I would very much like you to be the chair." And I'm like, "Well, isn't that great? You know, white guy from Pennsylvania, that's exactly who you need to run this organization." And I said, "I just won't fix it." Fantastic. And Bill, by the way, John Lewis, you've heard of John Lewis. And it's been great to try to capture them. This is how we got started. We started this whole process not by permission, but hoping for forgiveness. And the Omega Psi Phi's, which is like an African American Rotary or Kiwanis club, what they did is they put up a historic marker like you see right here. And it was kind of a test just to see what the community would think about this. And this man right here, the white guy, is Bernard Emerson. He's from Connecticut, but he was there in '61 and watched the bus burn in his front yard. He is on our committee. The lady is Georgia Calhoun, one of my dearest friends back in Alabama, civil rights leader, chairman of the Museum of Natural History in Anniston, and they jumped on board to make this happen. All the local officials showed up. The Omega Psi Phi's, they were there. And this photograph kind of blew my mind, but this is the daughter of one of the cameramen for one of the local TV stations. And most kids, Martin Luther King is a holiday. You know, they don't even know the significance of what's happening. But here's a little girl reading about the Freedom Riders for the very first time. And I think for a lot of folks that will come here, and a lot of folks that will go to Anniston, it'll be that's the very first time they'll hear about the Freedom Riders, which of course ignited the civil rights movement. It was the Greyhound bus station that we've turned into a national park. It's like I say, I think it's number 417 national parks, and it's the latest. We weren't able to get the Trailways bus station into the national park designation, but that's the Trailways, and that's Charles Person standing out in front of this big mural. We have a Trailways mural and a Greyhound mural. And Charles, who was on the second bus that arrived right there, and again, that's a two-dimensional mural. It's really good. He tells the story, and I was just telling Mark, especially when you get on that bus right there, and before you leave, look down that alleyway and think about it differently. Think about Charles's image. He said, Pete, everyone had been beaten so badly that the alleyway, the pathway between the seats was bloody, and when they came back to beat us and stack us up like pancakes, is what he said, they were slipping on the blood. I mean, it's just this horrific moment, but most people don't even know that the Trailways bus had come as a supporter. Well, so much time has passed, and things now, there's crisis can be opportunity. This was the Freedom Riders TV show that was done on public broadcasting, and since then we've had a lot of successes. This is the mural that we have at the Greyhound bus station, and it's painted on a building that we didn't own until last month. So working with groups like the Conservation Fund, the Trust for Public Land, and the National Park Foundation, we've been able to purchase that. So that will become our visitor center, and the Greyhound bus station that I just mentioned will be more of a historical reenactment area. We now have visitors coming from around the world. This is a group of international students. We had a groundbreaking where the bus had finally been attacked, and it was a beautiful thing. 600 people from our community came out. No one was against it, and children were singing, and the politicians were signing, documents, and everything was great. We broke ground on what would be this Freedom Riders Park, and little kids pulling the sign down, revealing the plaque, and we were feeling really great for 3 days. Is when the sheriff called me at 4 o'clock in the morning and said, Pete, the sign that you guys put up is on flames right now. It was burned. And so, I thought we had a pretty good idea. So we got in the car, went down there, and I had another sign. And the goal is to swap the burned sign out with a new sign. So whoever had done it, they wouldn't have had the satisfaction of seeing the sign burned. So we felt pretty good about that, except for that the local media had video and all this stuff. And so what we did, and this to me is kind of a lesson in terms of how you handle media. I mean, think about it. If you had read about that from wherever you are, you'd think, oh my God, they did it. The rednecks in Alabama did it again. And so what we did is we got ahead of the media, and I rewrote the press release saying act of vandalism unites community. And truly that is what happened. And it's always one or two folks, with a cigarette lighter, and it takes so little effort to cause problems. But we tried our very best to reverse it, and we still hang the burned sign at our museum now. This is a picture of where the old Forsyth store had been, and so this is where we are raising tens of millions of dollars to have a design element type of an exhibit out there, something like this. And each of those lines, this is looking straight down, each of those lines would be the path of each of the 14 people who had been on the bus that day, and how their interest in being a Freedom Rider got closer to the day, got closer to the turbulence, and then it ends up at the spot where the bus had actually burned. And we are working on a fundraiser in Manhattan, Washington, and Los Angeles. Remember I told you the little girl gave Hank the glass of water? Well, we are exploiting that beautiful moment, and so we set up a couple of actors on a green screen, and now we are creating merchandise with that little moment of hope. And so things had come together. There was so much community support for the concept of a new national park called Freedom Riders, but we worked with Washington. And it started with me, and I think you'll be pleased to know this started with Republican Richard Shelby. And Senator Shelby and I have been good friends. He and I have done other national parks and lots of other projects. And remember, by the way, right at this moment, he is chairman of appropriations for the United States of America, U.S. Senate. And I'm proud to tell you this is the first time the appropriations process has operated under what's called regular order. So other politicians can't screw around with, put pet projects in here, put this in over there. So Senator Shelby is really a master at the appropriations process. He's done a great job. But he helped us out initially by triggering this, working with President Obama. It was the funniest thing, because the Shelby camp was, sure, we're pleased to work on this project, but let's not talk about the details too much. And likewise, the other way, the Obama administration, we are thrilled Senator Shelby is doing this, but let's just keep this under the radar just enough where we can get it down. Because if anything gets too much light, it burns up. And so anyway, Senator Shelby did what he requested what's called a reconnaissance survey, which is a bureaucratic process that the Park Service makes you run through. It has to prove that it is worthy of your National Park Service status. And so we made it through that. This is Bill Harbor, the John Lewis's cellmate and my co-chair. We took several trips to the White House, and then we finally got the phone call that the Department of Interior was willing to do the big public hearing. Now, in the world of politics, when you have a big, high-profile public hearing, it's usually a predetermined outcome that it's going to work, because no one wants to have a big event and then say, sorry, it really wasn't your birthday at all, and you're not going to get any presents. So what we did is we had an event with Sally Jewell, who had been Secretary of the Interior, and it was very successful. And what we did is we took this bus. Have you heard of the New Flyer buses? That's based in Anniston, Alabama, and it's a Hungarian firm that makes these super expensive buses we can't afford in Alabama, but they're in Los Angeles and Chicago, and they donated one of their buses for the day to Freedom Riders on the banner. And everyone actually got on the bus, the Secretary of the Interior, the Director of the National Park Service, and we went from point A to where the bus had burned, point B, and by the time we had gotten out there, I think everyone was hook, line, and sinker. Secretary Jewell said it was the most powerful public hearing she had ever attended in her life, and this gives you the sense of what a day in Alabama looks like when people finally work together. And this little girl just blew my mind. She was praying for a national park, and I'm still touched every time I look at the picture. This is the little committee that we've assembled, and these are legislators, educators, professionals, and whatnot. And they have really made a difference in helping us move the project forward. We finally did get the designation. The Park Service comes to town. And these are the kinds of crowds that we get when we have Freedom Rider events. There is a new group right now, and it's on the top there. We meet in Washington once a year, and our goal is for minorities to get more involved in National Park Service issues and get outdoors more, hike more, and also wrap your mind around different national parks that are based on heritage tourism just as much as ecotourism. This is our acting superintendent, Reggie Peoples, and because this is a monument and not a congressionally mandated national park, there's different rules, and so this guy will be replaced until we can get a permanent budget. So my point here is that Freedom Riders National Monument is kind of a baby national park. Little River Canyon I told you about earlier, the Smoky Mountains, and all the big ones, Yosemite, they are adult. They're senior citizen national parks, and they have their feet on the ground. Ours needs a lot of love, care, and attention. And this is inside the old Greyhound bus station that we are slowly turning into a visitor facility. This is the mayor of Anniston with Park Service employees, and can you see the marker that's just over the mayor's head there? That's what you have copies of. These back here are 5 examples of the dozen or so we have throughout our town. And I recommend this to anyone who has a town where important historical things have happened. And I would suggest every one of you comes from a town that has important historical things that have happened. And what we've done is we put these plaques up, we have QR codes in the bottom, you wave your phone in front of it, and it really comes to life. It really brings history to life. And this is not a normal day in Anniston outside the bus station, but this is the kind of thing we like to see more of. And one more slide, and this is just my teenage national park. This is Little River Canyon. And that is Alabama. Yeah, Alabama has 2,000-foot mountains. It's not like the Poconos or anything like that. But this is an event called Canyon Fest, and that was last year. And I'm pleased to tell you at this very moment, we have Canyon Fest going on today. And the Cirque du Soleil has jugglers, and kids are happy, and the weather is nice down in Alabama. But that is basically the story of how we've been able to take a horrible act from history, try to make lemonade out of lemons, and welcome the public to learn about this. And we really appreciate Mark's interest in not only the Freedom Riders, but Trailways and Greyhound, and how transportation was one of the most important elements in human rights and civil rights until people could move around. They couldn't move around. And I've run across political scenarios where politicians would work very hard to keep mass transportation out of a community. You may know these stories better than I do, but they work very hard to keep mass transportation out of a community. They'll say it's too expensive, or they'll say that it's not needed, but what they really want to do is control their constituents. They don't want them to get out and learn other things. And when I went to Anniston, that was the case. And luckily, because of folks like y'all that have been able to create successful transportation hubs, folks can move around and do what they need to do and learn and be better citizens. One of the things I'm really trying to do is trying to wrap my mind around who was that bus driver on the Greyhound. And I would challenge Mark and this group to help us figure out who was that person so we can tell that person's story. That person probably went home and told somebody, geez, I had one heck of a day today. And we would love to hear the rest of that story. But how many of you all, I would suspect by looking around, you were old enough to be near TV in 1961. Raise your hand if you have some memories. Come on down and check out Freedom Riders. Any questions at all before we wrap it up? Mark, anything for the good of the order?
If people want to get involved in helping with the fundraising of the park, how do they do that?
Yeah, great, thanks. We have a Facebook page, and it's Freedom Riders Park, and there's a donate button, and we are actively soliciting donations to really tell this story in an accurate way that unites folks and reframes what some people have thought about Alabama in the South. And so if anyone's interested in that, we would welcome it for sure. Thanks for asking, Mark.